It's because you can't get pregnant, my husband said, blaming me for his affair and demanding a divorce. I was furious. He thought everything would be settled with the divorce, but he was mistaken. The real drama starts now. My name is Maria. I'm 43 and divorced a few months ago. My ex-husband, Johnson, is 48, and we didn't have any children. Sadly, the reason was on my end, but the original cause was partly Johnson's fault too. We married when I was 33, already close to the age for a high-risk pregnancy. I wanted to start trying for a baby as soon as possible. I went to the gynecologist to make sure there were no issues with my health. Unfortunately, Johnson got a big project at work, making it impossible to try for a baby. He was assigned to set up a new branch office in another state and had to stay there during the week, only returning home on weekends. Johnson asked me, "I'll try to come home on weekends, but if we have a kid, you'll be mostly on your own. Are you okay with that?" Not feeling confident managing alone, I hesitated to answer. We couldn't count on help from our families either, as they lived far away. Believing Johnson's words that he might return in a year, I gave up on trying for a baby for the time being. But his assignment ended up lasting 3 years. When he finally returned, we eagerly started trying to conceive, but with no success. A re-examination at the hospital revealed that my ovarian function had declined, likely due to aging. Though there were options like hormone therapy, the chances of pregnancy were slim. I was devastated, but knew it wasn't Johnson's fault. He apologized repeatedly. I suggested that we keep trying naturally and enjoy life, just the two of us, and he agreed. However, Johnson's attitude began to change over time. Seeing families out together, he would say enviously, "That must be nice, the perfect family picture." His words also grew harsher. There are several single mothers at my work who manage despite everything. They get support from the government. "You should have just gone for it," he would say, indirectly criticizing my reluctance. Certainly, such women are increasing, and I respect them very much, but I didn't have the confidence to do it myself. Was it my fault? After about 5 years of tension, Johnson suddenly asked, "What do you think about adoption?" "Adoption? That's out of the blue," I replied. "Well, I know a girl who got pregnant before marriage. Why don't we adopt her baby?" he suggested. Stunned by his bizarre proposal, I was silent until he explained, "I just really want a child." When I heard that girl got pregnant, it immediately came to mind. Adoption, huh? I thought. But something about what he said nagged at me. A girl? An acquaintance? I'd understand if it was a relative, but what does he mean by a young girl acquaintance? Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Oh, so she's young?" He replied, "She's just 24, a beautiful girl, so the baby inside her is sure to be healthy and attractive too." Could she be someone from his office? But would a woman in her early 20s discuss such a personal matter with a male boss over 45? Or could she be his mistress? That's when I first suspected he might be cheating. Observing him, I noticed several suspicious behaviors. He was constantly glued to his cell phone, coming home late, wearing underwear he hadn't bought, and faint traces of sweet perfume. But what really convinced me was him skipping our anniversary. We didn't have a wedding ceremony due to our jobs, but registered our marriage on December 24th, Christmas Eve, and always celebrated it as our anniversary. Yet this year, he chose a work party over our tradition. I believed his words that he would come home early and waited alone with a decorated Christmas tree, a cake, Christmas dinner prepared, and a gift for him. It was heartbreaking to wait alone. No response to my numerous calls. He finally contacted me the next morning, his voice sounding too cheerful as he said, sorry. I accidentally overslept at a friend's place." I replied, "Okay, I get it. I threw away the cake, Christmas dinner, and your present." He casually responded, "Oh, what a waste." No need to sulk just because I missed our anniversary. I'll make it up to you. I retorted, no, it's fine. You might as well not come back home. Why not live with the person you were with last night? He seemed to be still intoxicated or lost in the memories of last night, saying, hey, don't say that. Besides, her apartment is small. Unknowingly, he dug his own grave. I'm going home early tonight, Maria. Forgive me. The old man apologized to me in a brusque tone, which made me want to vomit. That evening, my husband came home with a face as if nothing had happened and again began talking about the adoption. Let's start the process soon. She wants to decide quickly. I asked, why are you so eager to adopt a stranger's child? What about her partner or parents? Can I talk to her or her parents first? He became flustered and stammered. That's because, right, the guy ran away and apparently she has no parents. I decided to test him. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in raising a child born from a reckless woman and a foolish man, I said. He blurted out in anger. What? You're insulting me and Jenna. There. He fell right into my trap. Realizing his affair was exposed, he finally understood. You could have just asked for a divorce instead of making me raise and this Jenna girl's child. That's called cunning, I said. Apparently, Jenna, unable to raise a child but still wanting to give birth, had convinced him of this plan. He said, it's your fault for not being able to have kids. You should be grateful I'm letting you raise my child. That was it. I snapped and said clearly, then let's go to court and see who's right. He lost his temper too. Fine. I don't want to see your face again. Divorce. Get out. Hearing that, I placed the divorce papers I had received earlier in front of him. Caught off guard, he signed them, unable to back down. I didn't want to spend another second with him. I gathered my essentials, filed the papers, and went back to my parents' house. A week later, he called me. Your stuff is still here. Pack it up and get out. Take everything. I informed him I'd come with my lawyer over the weekend. Shocked by the mention of a lawyer, he reluctantly agreed. When I threatened to go to his office unless we settled on alimony and property division, we eventually agreed on a settlement of $150,000 in total. But the next day, on my way back from a part-time job, a young woman approached me. It was the infamous Jenna. She was Johnson's type, short with long hair and cute, but her heavy makeup made her look tacky. I can't pay it all at once, she yelled in a shrill voice as soon as she opened her mouth. It's none of your business. Johnson agreed to pay in front of the lawyer. I replied. He actually hesitated, but he didn't want to deal with me any longer and eventually gave in. Why did you call me there? She demanded. That's something you should ask Johnson, I said, unimpressed. I thought we could just ditch the alimony sneakily, she mumbled. So she planned to make partial payments and then disappear by moving or changing jobs. Well, sorry for you, but you can live in that house, right? I remarked. That's Johnson's house, isn't it? What about the mortgage? She asked. It's in Johnson's name, and the mortgage is fully paid off, I informed her. Well, I guess that's okay then, she said, backing off with a tone that suggested she was up to something. I think she is up to something, but whatever it wasn't my concern anymore. 2 years later, Johnson contacted me. Please lend me some money, he begged. What? I asked in disbelief. Those two are spending like crazy, he exclaimed. Apparently, Jenna's mother had conveniently moved up to the city and was staying in that house. According to Jenna, Johnson wanted a child, so I gave birth, but I never said I'd raise it. Once she realized she could have pawned the child off on me, she said, raising a child is hard, so I'm calling Mom, and brought her mother from the countryside. Johnson initially welcomed her, thinking she'd help with the child care, but It turned out neither she nor Jenna was doing much parenting and instead spent their time frolicking. Well, knowing her mom, that figures, I said, unimpressed. Then Johnson, who still seems to like Jenna, suddenly yelled at me, "Don't insult Jenna. She agreed to marry an old man like me and even had my child. It's all your fault for not being able to have kids," he accused, bringing up the past. Okay, I can't argue with that. But can I say something? I asked, "What now?" He grumbled, "Remember when I went for a fertility check 3 years ago? You were tested too, remember?" "I do," I reminded him. "Yeah, I guess," he recalled. "I went to hear the results alone. Actually, they said you had issues too," I revealed. "What?" he gasped in shock. The gynecologist had mentioned that for his age, Johnson's sperm quality was quite poor, making pregnancy unlikely even if I had no issues. I had learned of my problems first, so I assumed I was the main cause and didn't want to hurt him by revealing his results. "That can't be. Jenna got pregnant," he argued in denial. "Whether it's your child or not, I don't know," I said, silencing him. His reaction suggested he might have had doubts himself. I rubbed salt in his wound. "Even if a DNA test proves it's not your child, it might not change anything." "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "The child is over a year old, right?" I pointed out. "So what?" he pressed. "Current law doesn't recognize paternity disavowal suits filed after a year since birth," I explained. "If discovered after a year, a different lawsuit is needed, often leading to disputes. Even if a DNA test proves no biological relation, there's a chance of losing the case." "Why?" "The test clearly shows it's not my biological child," he protested. "Well, there's a Supreme Court ruling. Even after divorce, the man had to pay child support," I explained thoroughly. Hearing this, Johnson just muttered, "It can't be. It's not true," in a trembling voice. "Sorry for your troubles." According to neighbors, those two, or rather three, are constantly battling every day. It's unclear if the child is Johnson's or not. "We're getting divorced. Get out. Sell this house and pay child support. I'm never leaving. You get out." Such arguments are heard daily, and they're reportedly quite intense. They've had the police called on them multiple times, and both women have even been detained. As for me, I'm currently living with my parents. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm enjoying my single life, keeping busy with work and hobbies. Hi, I'm Luna, and I want to share my story. It's not one that's easy to tell, but it's important. I hope it helps others who might be facing similar struggles. My story begins in Austin, Texas, where I live and work as a high school teacher. I was 32 when I met Daniel, a 34-year-old Uber driver, through a dating service. We hit it off immediately. Daniel had a way of making me laugh, and I was drawn to his easygoing nature. We got married 3 years ago, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. I loved him, and he said he loved me. I was earning more than Daniel, which wasn't an issue at first. He always praised my career and seemed genuinely supportive. But as time went on, I noticed subtle changes in him. Little comments turned into frequent sarcasm, and he started acting more controlling. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was just being overly sensitive. Our problems grew as Daniel's behavior changed. He began making expensive purchases without discussing them with me, assuming I would cover the costs. I was shocked when he bought a new TV and a fancy sofa, putting them on our credit card without asking. When I questioned him about it, he shrugged it off, saying, "You make good money, so it should be fine." His parents, too, seemed to have a sudden change in attitude. Initially, they were warm and supportive, congratulating us on our marriage and praising my career. But soon they started asking for money. My mother-in-law would call, saying, "Luna, we've seen a lovely designer bag we'd like, and we thought you could help us out." When I refused, explaining that I didn't lend money to anyone, even family, their reaction was harsh. "How dare you? We agreed to this marriage because of your job, and now you're being stingy. Daniel's parents were relentless. They called often, making demands and accusing me of being a bad daughter-in-law. Daniel, instead of standing up for me, sided with his parents, adding to my stress. His sarcastic comments about my salary and our finances became more frequent, making me question if this marriage was worth it. Despite all this, I kept trying to make things work. I even started considering divorce, especially since we didn't have any kids yet. The thought of leaving Daniel was painful, but it seemed like the only way to escape the growing toxicity in our relationship. Every time I brought up divorce, Daniel avoided the conversation, brushing it aside as if it were not important. One day, everything took a turn for the worse. My father, who had always been my rock, fell seriously ill. He was diagnosed with advanced heart disease, and the doctors said his condition was critical. I was devastated. I rushed to the hospital, hoping for the best, but fearing the worst. When I informed Daniel about my father's condition, his response was chilling. He showed no sympathy and said, "If you want to stress out your already sick father with our divorce, I'm fine with that. We can proceed anytime." I was shocked and heartbroken. How could someone I loved be so callous? As my father's health declined, the tension at home became unbearable. Daniel's attitude grew more indifferent, and his demands became more frequent. He began pressing me about our finances and hinted at how much he could benefit from my father's eventual passing. After my father passed away, I inherited $70,000 from his estate. I decided to keep this inheritance private. I didn't want Daniel to know about it. I feared he would try to manipulate me into giving him the money or using it in ways I didn't agree with. I was still grieving and didn't need additional stress from him. But my attempt at keeping the inheritance a secret didn't last long. Daniel discovered the money after threatening my mother. He coerced her into revealing the details of the inheritance, which was a painful betrayal. Daniel wasted no time in planning how to use the money. He intended to renovate our home without consulting me, assuming that since it was his right, he could do whatever he wanted with it. I was furious. The last thing I wanted was to have Daniel controlling the money that was meant to be a legacy for my father. I decided it was time to confront the situation head-on. But before I could gather my thoughts and discuss it with Daniel, he had already started the renovation plans, using the inheritance money as if it were his own. The situation was becoming increasingly dire. I knew that if I wanted to save myself from further manipulation and greed, I had to act quickly. The once loving and supportive husband I married had turned into a manipulative and controlling man, driven by greed. And his parents, who had once seemed so kind, were now just as bad, if not worse. It was clear that I had to make some difficult decisions. My heart was heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. But I knew that in order to reclaim my peace and integrity, I needed to confront the situation directly. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to find a way out of this mess and protect myself from the toxicity that had taken over my life. Continuing from where I left off, things only got worse after Daniel discovered the $70,000 inheritance. He seemed to think the money was rightfully his to control, and his behavior became increasingly aggressive. I was struggling to manage my grief and deal with Daniel's escalating demands, and I felt trapped. One evening, I came home to find Daniel waiting for me, a smug expression on his face. "Luna, we need to talk about the renovations," he said, his voice dripping with entitlement. I knew he had already started planning, and the thought of him using my father's money without my consent made me fume. "What renovations?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You didn't discuss anything with me." Daniel waved his hand dismissively. "We've been living in that old house for too long. It's time for an upgrade, and I've decided to use the inheritance for it." I felt my heart race. The inheritance is not for renovations. It's my money, and I want to decide what to do with it. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Oh, come on. We both know it's for the benefit of our home. Why are you being so selfish?" I tried to explain that I needed to handle the inheritance carefully and that his actions were disrespectful. But he cut me off. "You're always making everything about you. This money is going to make our home better. Why can't you just support me for once?" Daniel's arrogance, was unbearable. He had no respect for the fact that this money came from my father's estate and was supposed to be a tribute to his memory, not a tool for his personal gain. The next few days were filled with tension. I tried to keep a low profile, hoping the situation would somehow resolve itself. But Daniel's demands and manipulations didn't stop. He began making aggressive phone calls to contractors and started making plans for extensive renovations, using the inheritance money he had no right to. The situation reached a boiling point when Daniel confronted me about the property documents related to the inheritance. He demanded to know where I had kept them, insisting he needed to access the money. I was stunned. How could he be so brazen? "I'm not going to let you control this money," I said firmly. "I'm keeping everything in my name. You have no right to it." Daniel's face darkened. "If you don't hand over the documents, I'll make sure everyone knows how you've been holding out on me. Do you really want to deal with that kind of trouble?" His threats were hollow, but they made me realize just how far he was willing to go. I decided I needed to take action before things escalated further. It wasn't long before Daniel's manipulative tactics took another turn. He started involving his parents more directly in the situation. They began calling me regularly, demanding I hand over the inheritance or they would take legal action. Their tone was accusatory and confrontational, showing no sympathy for my situation. Their demands were so intense that I decided I had to take a stand. I consulted a lawyer to understand my rights and options. I learned that I had legal protections and that Daniel's behavior could be classified as financial abuse. The inheritance, being part of my father's estate, was legally mine to manage. Meanwhile, Daniel's actions became more desperate. He began plotting ways to access the property documents related to the inheritance. He even went as far as to threaten my mother, trying to intimidate her into giving him the information he wanted. It was a new low, and it made me realize just how toxic and dangerous the situation had become. One day, I returned home to find Daniel in the process of tampering with the property documents. He had managed to sneak into my office and was rifling through the files. When he saw me, he tried to cover up his actions with a look of feigned innocence. "I was just looking for something," he said, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. "This is my father's property," I said coldly. "You have no right to it. You're crossing a line." Daniel's face turned red with anger. "You're being unreasonable. This is about improving our life together. Why can't you see that?" "I see it very clearly," I retorted. "You're trying to exploit my father's legacy for your own gain. This has to stop." The confrontation left me shaken but resolute. I knew I had to protect myself and the inheritance from further manipulation. The thought of Daniel using the money for his personal projects, while I struggled to maintain control over something that was rightfully mine, was overwhelming. As I prepared to move forward with the divorce proceedings, I realized I had to deal with the aftermath of Daniel's manipulations. I had to secure the property documents and make sure that nothing was done to jeopardize the inheritance or my father's memory. The situation was reaching a critical point, and I knew that I needed to be strong and decisive. I had to make sure that I didn't let Daniel's greed and manipulation ruin my life any further. The road ahead was going to be difficult, but I was determined to reclaim my peace and protect what was rightfully mine. As I braced myself for the inevitable clash with Daniel, the tension in our home became unbearable. Every day was a struggle, and the atmosphere was charged with hostility. Daniel's actions had reached new lows, and his arrogance was pushing me to the edge. I knew I had to take decisive action before things spiraled further out of control. One evening, after a particularly heated argument, I decided it was time to confront Daniel about his blatant disregard for the inheritance. I found him lounging in the living room, looking relaxed despite the chaos he had caused. His casual demeanor only fueled my frustration. "Daniel, we need to talk," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced up from the television with a dismissive look. "What now, Luna?" "I'm tired of your games," I began. "The inheritance is not yours to use for renovations or anything else. It's my money, and I will decide what to do with it." Daniel rolled his eyes. "You're being unreasonable. We're supposed to be a team. Why can't you just let me make our home better?" "It's not about the house," I replied, fighting to keep my composure. "It's about respect and boundaries. You have no right to claim what doesn't belong to you. Daniel's face hardened. You're just being selfish. You know how much this means to me. Why are you making this so difficult? His words stung, but I refused to back down. I'm not being selfish. I'm standing up for myself. You've already tried to intimidate my mother and tamper with the property documents. I'm not going to let you get away with it. The confrontation left both of us simmering with anger. Daniel stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I was left alone, feeling a mix of fear and determination. I knew I had to follow through with the divorce, but I needed to secure the inheritance first. The following day, things took a turn for the worse. I received a call from my mother, sounding frantic. Luna, you need to come over right away. Daniel is here, and he's causing a scene. My heart raced as I drove to my mother's house. When I arrived, I found Daniel standing in the middle of the living room, shouting at my mother. The scene was chaotic, and I could see the distress on my mother's face. Daniel, what are you doing? I demanded as I entered the room. He turned to me with a look of wild desperation. I need the inheritance, Luna. This is our chance to fix everything. Don't you see that? I could barely contain my anger. You have no right to demand anything from me. This is my father's money, and I'm not giving it to you. Daniel's frustration reached a boiling point. You're being unreasonable and cruel. I need that money for our future. Why are you making this so hard? Because it's not yours to take. I shouted back. You're making a scene and threatening my family. This has to stop. As Daniel continued to argue, I noticed that he seemed more desperate than ever. It became clear to me that he was losing control and was willing to do anything to get his hands on the inheritance. I realized that I had to act quickly to protect myself and my family. The situation escalated further when I found out that Daniel had stolen the property documents related to the inheritance. He had taken them from my home, hoping to sell the property without my knowledge. I was horrified and felt violated. I contacted my lawyer immediately and informed him of the theft. He advised me to file a police report and take legal action to protect the property. I followed his advice, and the authorities began investigating the situation. The thought of Daniel potentially getting away with his deceit was unbearable, but I knew I had to see this through. Despite his attempts to manipulate and intimidate me, Daniel's plans were thwarted. It turned out that the property title was still in my father's name, making it impossible for him to sell it without legal complications. This news seemed to deflate him, and he began to backtrack, attempting to reconcile. One day, Daniel showed up at my parents' house, his demeanor a mix of anger and desperation. Luna, please. I'm sorry for everything. I just wanted to make things better for us. Can't we work this out? I looked at him coldly. It's too late for apologies. You've crossed too many lines. The inheritance isn't cash, it's property, and you can't touch it. His face fell as he realized that his plans had failed. He tried to salvage what he could, but I was resolute. The damage was done, and I was determined to move forward. As the legal proceedings continued, Daniel faced mounting pressure. The investigation into his theft of the property documents revealed his attempts to exploit the situation. The news spread, and his reputation, as well as that of his parents, began to suffer. They faced public embarrassment and financial troubles, adding to the pressure on them. Through all this, I remained focused on my goal. The divorce proceedings were initiated, and I was determined to protect my inheritance and my peace of mind. It was clear that Daniel's greed and manipulation had led to his downfall, and I was determined to see this through to the end. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. With Daniel's attempts to manipulate the situation exposed, the pressure on him mounted. I was determined to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it was. My lawyer and I worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in order and that the property was legally protected. One afternoon, while I was sorting through some paperwork at my mother's house, the phone rang. It was my lawyer, and his voice was grave. Luna, I have some news. Daniel has been arrested for theft. The shock hit me hard. I had hoped that the legal process would bring resolution, but hearing that Daniel had been arrested was a stark reminder of how far things had deteriorated. My lawyer explained that Daniel's attempt to sell the property illegally had been uncovered, leading to his arrest. It was a significant step in holding him accountable for his actions. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the situation was finally being addressed, but sadness over the collapse of what had once been a hopeful relationship. Despite everything, I had hoped for a different resolution, one where we could have resolved our issues amicably. As news of Daniel's arrest spread, his parents were thrust into the spotlight. They faced public embarrassment and financial difficulties as a result of their son's actions. Their desperation was palpable, and they reached out to me in a final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. I received a heartfelt plea from Daniel's mother. "Luna, please, we're in dire straits. We need your help. Daniel's actions have destroyed us, and we don't know what to do." I listened to her voice on the phone, but I felt no inclination to offer assistance. The damage done to my family and myself was too great. I had endured enough manipulation and greed from Daniel and his family. I had to prioritize my well-being and peace of mind. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," I said firmly. "What Daniel did was wrong, and I need to move forward. This chapter of my life is over." The finality of my decision was both empowering and challenging. I knew that cutting ties with Daniel and his family was the right choice for my own healing. It was time to move on and start fresh, away from the toxicity that had plagued my life for so long. With Daniel's arrest and the property secured, the next step was to sell my family home. It was a painful decision, but one that was necessary for my own peace. My mother and I found a new place to live, far from the memories and drama that had haunted us. The move was a symbolic gesture, a way to leave the past behind and begin anew. As we settled into our new home, I felt a sense of relief and liberation. The weight of the past was lifting, and I could finally focus on rebuilding my life. The inheritance, once a source of conflict, became a symbol of my strength and resilience. It was a reminder of the importance of self-respect and personal boundaries. In the end, the story of my marriage and the inheritance was not just about greed and manipulation. It was about finding the courage to stand up for myself and make choices that aligned with my values. It was about reclaiming my life and my happiness, despite the challenges and heartache. Daniel's arrest marked the end of a painful chapter, but it also signaled the beginning of a new journey. I was determined to embrace this new chapter with hope and optimism. The lessons learned from this experience would stay with me, guiding me toward a future where I could find true peace and fulfillment. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realized that the most important lesson was the value of self-respect and the strength to set boundaries. It was a difficult journey, but one that ultimately led me to a place of greater clarity and self-awareness. And so, with the past behind me and a new chapter ahead, I look forward to a future where I can build a life filled with positivity and growth. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it for the chance to create a life where I can truly be at peace.
My name is Jenny White. I am 27 years old and a housewife. I married my husband, Alex, who is 3 years older than me, 3 years ago. We've struggled to have children, but our relationship had been relatively good. However, that all changed due to my husband's actions. Instead of showing remorse, you present me with divorce papers. Are you sane? The action that ruined our relationship was my husband's affair with my childhood friend, Kristen. When confronted about the affair, he showed no remorse and instead presented me with prepared divorce papers, declaring, "Why should I have to be the one to apologize? The affair was because of your infertility. I get so tired of coming home to this might work or that might be good. I'm sick of it. I got married when I was 24. We wanted children and started trying to conceive immediately after our wedding. Being young, I thought it would be easy to conceive without any trouble. However, it didn't go as planned, and I didn't get pregnant at all in these 3 years." He justified his affair with Kristen by blaming it on this. People normally can have children without any trouble. But you've wasted so much time and money because of you. As I vented to her, we ended up in that kind of relationship. I don't see why you should blame me. And yet, how could you? No matter what you say, I am going to divorce you and remarry Kristen. Kristen is now pregnant with my child. What? My child that couldn't be conceived with you. Happened immediately when I was with Kristen. That's why I intended to divorce you. And remarry her even before you confronted me about the affair. It just worked out well. As it turns out, my childhood friend Kristen is pregnant with my husband's child. It seems he was planning to choose her over me from the start. I contacted Kristen, but she repeated the same things my husband had said. Disappointed by the actions of my childhood friend, I realized arguing was futile and accepted the divorce. That was 32 years ago. I am now 59, and I barely remember those times. Yet, fate has a strange way of reuniting people, and I unexpectedly ran into them again. Is that Jenny? What? Indeed. It is Jenny. What are you doing here? Do you know where you are? This is the maternity clinic, the maternity clinic. What do you need at a maternity clinic? Are you still not giving up on having children at your age? I was at a maternity clinic that had just opened last year in our hometown. The fact that I, infertile, was at a maternity clinic seemed amusing enough to them to point and laugh openly. We haven't seen each other in a while, but you're still the same. I understand the desire for children as a woman. But you're really making the doctors cry, aren't you? If you're infertile and childless at your age, there's no hope left, right? You might even be getting taken advantage of, letting you hope while draining your money. That's possible. Whatever you say now doesn't affect me anymore. But maybe you should look around? This is a maternity clinic, as you say. It's a hospital. If you can't be quiet, please leave once your business is done so you don't bother other people. Their words echoed in the quiet waiting room, and the other patients frowned upon hearing them. Unperturbed by the reactions around them, they looked at each other and snickered. We'd love to leave, but we can't just yet. Actually, the daughter Kristen was pregnant with back then is now pregnant herself. We're here for her checkup. So, we can't leave until her appointment is over. I see. Moreover, the doctor seeing her is the head of this maternity clinic. The hospital is new, just opened last year. And the head is only 31 years old but is reputed to be very skilled, being supportive during the unstable times of pregnancy. But Jenny, you wouldn't know about that, would you? Sorry. The two of them laughed mockingly at my silence, their disdainful and belittling nature unchanged from 32 years ago. Witnessing this, I decided it was time to reveal a truth they were unaware of. I'm proud as a mother to hear such praise for my son. What? Son? Mother? You can't possibly have a child, can you? Have you finally lost your mind from wanting children so much? When did I say I didn't have a child? After you and I divorced, I remarried a man I met 6 months later. I found out I was pregnant soon after. And the son I had then is the one who opened this hospital. What? That's impossible. You must be lying just to show off. There's no way she, who didn't get pregnant even once in 3 years, could remarry and get pregnant immediately. Even if she did have a son, do you really think he could become a doctor? She wouldn't have the earnings to send him to medical school. That's all just bluff. There's no need to pay her any mind. It was then. Ah, Mrs. White, were you here? I've been looking for you. Didn't you hear the call at the reception? What? Actually, I need to talk to both of you about your daughter. Mom. Mom? Wait, what exactly is? Didn't I tell you earlier? He's my son. There's nothing strange about my son calling me Mom. Yes, today my sister came for a prenatal checkup. My husband is overseas on a business trip, so Mom came to accompany her. Mom, Erica's checkup will be almost over soon. The doctor said everything is going well. That's good to hear. I'll have to contact my husband later. The two were shocked as they watched our exchange. What did you say? You have 2 children. She must be the stepchildren from your remarriage, right? That's the only thing that makes sense. Still doubting? My son and daughter are both truly mine, born to me. That's impossible. Then my son responded to their conversation. Stepchildren from a remarriage, what do you mean? Wait, Mom, you knew Mr. White? My son knew I was divorced, but of course, he didn't know my ex-husband's name or face. He looked puzzled and asked me. They're not just acquaintances, they are my ex-husband and my former childhood friend. I don't know what fate it is, but we met here for the first time in 32 years. I never wanted to see them again. Then my son's expression changed. Oh, is this about that time you were treated as infertile? And he chose your childhood friend? You told your own son about that. I didn't tell him. But he found out when he was in middle school. He found the documents when I was seeking compensation through a lawyer. He asked me what it was all about. So, I told him. What exactly you two did. But still. Well, what happened in the past doesn't concern me. It happened before I was born. But what do you think about cheating because of infertility? We have many patients who come here struggling with infertility. Most couples work hard together to address the issue. Men who blame infertility on women and cheat are rare. But, actually, the causes of infertility are nearly equal between men and women. Most men who cheat blaming infertility are mistaken. We often hear stories where upon testing, it turns out there was nothing wrong with the wife, but the problem was with the husband. I can understand not wanting to accept that you might be the cause of infertility. But to cheat without even testing and blaming it on the woman. As a doctor and as a man, I think it's the lowest thing you can do. Especially with your wife's childhood friend, it's unthinkable. But, well, thanks to Mr. White divorcing her, I exist as I am today. It's complicated, though. And it seems like Mom is happy now. She married a lawyer, and then my sister and I were born. What did you just say? A lawyer, father. Yes, my father is a lawyer. He was a paralegal at a law firm when he met my mother. He became a lawyer quite soon after that. Right? No way, that law firm is. Yes, I met him at the law firm I consulted about you. He was working there as a paralegal. He was assisting a lawyer. After our interactions ended, he approached me, and we were married within 6 months. Just now, you said my son couldn't possibly become a doctor. Indeed, my earnings alone might not have been enough to send my son to a university with a medical school. But by marrying my husband and combining our efforts, we were able to send our son to medical school. Of course, it was possible because of my son's own hard work. We just supported him from behind. I am grateful to my husband and children. They have given me happiness I couldn't have imagined when you left me. At my words, the two were speechless and fell silent. By the way, you mentioned earlier that you were looking for them. Is something wrong? Is there something you want to know about your daughter? Oh yes, that was it. Do you both know your blood types? Blood type? Yes, there's something I need to confirm. I'm A. I'm O. What? What's the matter? Do you know your daughter's blood type? Yes. I believe my wife said she's a type. I think she thinks she's a type too. What about it? While they were talking, I glanced at Kristen, who was sweating profusely and holding her face in her hands. Then, my son's next words revealed the reason. Actually, when we did a blood test on your daughter, we discovered that her blood type is not A but B. What? In the early stages of pregnancy, we conduct tests to ensure there are no risks to the mother and child during the pregnancy. We also test the mother's blood type. This is also to ensure quick response in case an emergency transfusion is needed. As your husband mentioned earlier, your daughter said she was type A. However, we can't just transfuse type A blood based on that statement alone. If by any chance she had a blood type that couldn't receive type A, it would be a serious problem. And this time, to prevent any such emergencies, we tested your daughter's blood type and found out it is not A, but B. That's impossible. What did my daughter say about this? We haven't spoken to your daughter and her husband yet. There could be various circumstances. So we thought we'd check with the parents first since they were at the hospital. We had the reception call you earlier. My son informed them that their daughter's blood type, B, could not have come from two parents who are A and O. The ex-husband stood there stunned. What does this mean? Why would B type arise from A and O types? It must be a mistake. It has to be. That's the only explanation. Were you cheating? What? With some B-type man? What are you starting now? There's no way I did such a thing. But the fact is, she's said to be B-type. B-type can only come from a parent who is B or AB type. Since we're A and O, we don't have the genes for a B-type child. Explain what this means. The ex-husband's voice echoed in the waiting room, creating a complete scene. Mr. White, please calm down. How can I be calm? For 32 years, I thought she was my daughter. And now there's a suspicion she might be someone else's. Who exactly is? By the way, wasn't Kristen's longtime boyfriend B-type? At these words, Kristen appeared shocked. What are you saying? Remember, you had been dating him for nearly 10 years just before you decided to remarry my ex-husband. I think he said he was type B. Why do you know my boyfriend's blood type? We once went out together, remember? On our way back, we saw a sign for a blood donation bus. He casually mentioned, they're short on type B blood right now. And I'm type B, maybe I should donate. He actually went to donate. So I remember clearly. You, with that man? It's not like that. She is truly your child. Then why is her blood type B? Think about it, it's impossible for two parents with types A and O to produce a type B child. Were you cheating? To catch my attention, did you pretend her boyfriend's child was mine? No. Believe me. She is definitely type A. She was tested at birth. The mistake is with this doctor. They must be confusing her results with someone else's. Talking big about opening a practice so young. Maybe he's a quack? Just a moment ago, you were bragging about how skilled and reputable the doctor handling your daughter is. You change your opinions too quickly. Busy person, aren't you? But that's because. And it's far-fetched to say that the child is his. What do you mean by that? You knew, didn't you? What? That it wasn't me who was infertile, but him. What are you talking about? Why would I be infertile? Didn't our son just say? Infertility isn't just a woman's issue. But why am I supposed to be infertile? That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. The doctors told me clearly back then. Indeed, it was my husband, not I, who was diagnosed with infertility at that time. The words I spoke turned their faces pale with shock. It's a lie, right? It's a joke, right? It's neither a lie nor a joke. But that's never been mentioned. What are you talking about? Have you forgotten? They tested me and found no cause of infertility. So they suggested your husband should also be tested. You were tested, weren't you? I told you that the issue was with you. I never heard such a thing. I definitely told you. But you never took my words seriously. All infertility is the woman's fault. A man could never be the cause of infertility. Because it's the woman who has to get pregnant. That's what you used to say. But I kept telling you to go to the hospital with me over and over. But you insisted it was my fault. At that time, it came out that you were cheating on me with my childhood friend Kristen. When confronted, Kristen said she was pregnant with your child. The doctors had told you that without treatment, natural conception was almost impossible for you. I wondered how you could have easily gotten Kristen pregnant, but it was just as I thought. Are you really saying that? I wouldn't lie about something like this. So, the reason I couldn't get pregnant during our 3 years of marriage was because you were infertile. I've given birth to 2 children since then. That's the proof. It can't be true. Ah. It's been 32 years, so I don't know what has changed since then. But at that time, I was certainly told that was the case. Such a thing. If what you are saying is true, then that child might not be mine after all. If it bothers you that much, why not get a DNA test? That might clear up any doubts you have. And Kristen, you must have had an inkling, right? That despite trying, you couldn't get pregnant. Perhaps he was also a reason for the infertility. So, you got pregnant by your boyfriend at the time and claimed it was his child? Kristen, no. That's not true. That child is definitely ours. After raising her for 32 years, why would you get swayed by what your ex-wife says now? Besides, just because it was almost impossible doesn't mean it was absolutely impossible, right? There might still be a chance. Just because you were told you are infertile doesn't mean there is 0 chance of natural conception. There is still a possibility. See, I told you. But if you're going to bring up this topic, as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible for parents with blood types A and O to have a child with blood type B. That's 100% certain. So, what does that mean? If either of your blood types was recorded incorrectly, there might be a chance of having a child with blood type B. But if your blood types are definitely A and O, it's difficult to say. But it's highly likely that she is not your child. That's basically what it means. How can you say that? Do you think it's okay for a gynecologist to tell someone that's not your child? People do ask sometimes. Patients ask if it's possible for 2 type A parents to have a type B child. If both parents are type A, the child can only be A or O. Conversely, if one parent is A and the other is B, then the child could be of any blood type. In such cases, it's my duty as a doctor to convey the truth. Fudging or lying can lead to serious issues for everyone involved later on. When the son explained this, Kristen turned bright red and began trembling. So, you mean the child might actually. As I said earlier, if there was a mistake with the parents' blood types, it wouldn't be strange for the child's blood type to be different. Is it possible for there to be a mistake with the parents' blood types? Sometimes the blood type tested at birth can be wrong. Or perhaps you misunderstood the blood type you were told by your parents when you were a child. But it's unlikely there was a mistake with the mother's blood type, especially since blood tests are done during the early stages of pregnancy. Like with your daughter. That means the mistake might be with the father. Have you ever had a major illness or surgery? I had surgery after an accident in my 20s. Then they would have tested your blood type. Have you ever been told there was a mistake with your blood type? No. I see. Then there's only one possibility. The father must have the B gene. Enough. Stop it. I've been quiet listening to you. Talking about someone's daughter as if she's a child born from an affair. Do you think you have a duty to tell the truth? Was there any need to blab about such private matters? I'll sue you for defamation. Even if she turns out to be your biological child, a child born from an affair isn't wrong. Because she was conceived through an affair with my husband. What did you say? And if you're thinking of suing me for defamation, you should be prepared to be sued yourselves. What? In this busy maternity clinic waiting room. This isn't a place for the infertile. It's pitiful that you can't have children. Who said those words to me? Well. At that moment, the two finally noticed the piercing stares of those around them. There were couples struggling with infertility and women suffering from illnesses. Their cruel words had everyone glaring at them. So, that was, Go ahead and sue if you want. Do as you like. But don't forget you've done even worse. Cornered, she glared at me and snapped. What are you saying I've done? Ganging up and blaming me like this. I feel sick. What do you mean that's not your child? So what if my daughter's blood type turned out to be B? Children with blood type B might be born from A and O type parents, right? It was then. Wait, what does that mean about my blood type being B? You said a child can't be born from two type A and O parents, right? Their daughter and her husband, having finished their consultation, had come to the waiting room after hearing the commotion. Nicole, please tell me clearly. No, that's not it. It's just a mistake by the doctor or something. A mistake? That can't be right, can it? We've had proper tests at the hospital. Doctor, am I really type B? Yes. Definitely type B. And a child cannot be born from A and O types, right? That's correct. Nicole? Mom, are you listening to me? I think you should listen to my story first. Am I not your child? No, that's not true. That can't be. Then why was I born with type B from A and O type parents? That's strange, isn't it? No, because. And you said earlier that Mom's old boyfriend was type B. Could he be my real dad? That's. Answer me. How can this be happening when I'm about to have my first child? Why is there a doubt now that I might not be your child? With that, she broke down in tears. My heart ached seeing her cry. Pregnancy is a mentally unstable period already. To discover that she might have a different blood type from her parents at such a time. Nicole. Let's go home and talk. It's too public here, and we can't discuss this calmly. So, don't touch me. Just leave me alone for a bit. I'll contact you when I've calmed down. Until then, I don't want to see either of you." Saying that, the daughter and her husband turned to leave. "Wait, Nicole." "Hey, Nicole." Ignoring her parents, she and her husband headed for the exit. And her parents hurriedly followed. This has turned into a huge mess. Did I maybe say something wrong? I never thought it would turn out like this. No, you didn't. This is their own doing. It was bound to be revealed eventually. It just so happened that the truth came out today after 32 years. As I watched their retreating figures, I relayed this to my son. Later, my son shared more news with me. The other day, Mrs. Ito came to our hospital. It seems that they did a DNA test after that, and it turned out the husband wasn't the father. I suspected as much. But why did she come to you? Well, after that, they discussed it as a family. They ordered a DNA kit online and tested it. And the result showed 99% certainty that there was no parental relationship between the husband and the daughter. She insisted the results were definitely wrong and demanded our hospital conduct another DNA test properly. I told her the DNA testing kits she used were highly reliable, and repeating the tests wouldn't change the outcome. She just wouldn't listen, kept saying this can't be happening. This will lead to divorce, our family will fall apart. So what ended up happening? We did the test. But of course, the results didn't change. The daughter was 99% not his child. When she saw the results, the wife exploded in anger. She couldn't believe it, accused us of lying, and started causing a scene. Eventually, we couldn't handle it ourselves, and we had to call the police to take her away. That must have been tough. It was more than tough. We see all sorts of people at the hospital, but that was unprecedented. With a heavy sigh, he recounted the events. A few months later, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. It was her ex-husband. His voice was grave as he spoke. After that, I did a DNA paternity test with my daughter. And just like you said, we are not biologically related. I never imagined this could happen. Before I met you that day, it never crossed my mind. Then things got messy with Kristen. In the end, she confessed the child was from her boyfriend at the time. She was distressed he hadn't proposed, and we got married. She was jealous and took me from you, thinking if she got pregnant by me, who was struggling with infertility, it would be easy to take me away. But she couldn't get pregnant, ended up back with her boyfriend. Got pregnant by him, and then lied that it was my child. For 32 years. I see. He thought I didn't know about Kristen storming into my son's gynecology clinic. So he shared the entire story with me. In the end, I divorced Kristen. Moreover, after hearing the whole story, our daughter. She decided to cut ties, blocked my calls. My parents are gone, and I have no siblings. I'm all alone now. That's unfortunate. But why tell me all this? That's just it. If you had listened to me earlier, maybe it wouldn't have ended like this. But it's too late for regrets now. This is the future you chose back then. After that conversation, I never saw him again. Where he is or what he's doing now, I don't know, but he surely regrets his choices deeply.
Divorce papers had been duly filed. When it came to dividing the property, I made the decision to claim the house. Despite my insistence, Ben dismissed any notion that he could contest it. Uttering those final words, he abruptly left the hospital room, indifferent to my pleas for him to wait, and my desire for a meaningful conversation. That was how I found myself discarded, even in the midst of battling a serious illness like cancer. Loneliness enveloped me, but strangely, the negative emotions that once lingered in my heart began to dissipate. It was as if my love for Ben had evaporated at that moment. I acknowledged that Ben, who had insulted me and consistently acted selfishly, deserved some form of retribution. I began calmly strategizing my revenge. My name is Wendy Morgan, a 50-year-old housewife living with my husband Ben. Our marriage, devoid of children, had spanned 30 years. Initially, I believed we were a supportive couple, but an irreparable rift had developed between us. In my understanding of marriage, partners should support, challenge, and complement each other. However, this was absent in our relationship. Returning from an errand, I found Ben demanding dinner immediately, oblivious to the continuous responsibilities of a housewife. Even on his days off, he prioritized his own leisure over supporting me. Over the years, Ben never extended a helping hand, regardless of how busy or unwell I was. His perception of a housewife's role seemed limited to constant labor, and he never allowed me to rest, even during illness. I had hoped for a marriage built on mutual support, but Ben's actions contradicted that ideal. The early days saw me attempting to bridge the gap, but Ben remained resolute, asserting his belief that as a housewife, I had no grounds to complain. Love had long faded, and I didn't anticipate unwavering support in everything. Still, I longed for simple kindness during challenging days. Ben's refusal to acknowledge my humanity and hardships widened the rift between us, turning our marriage joyless and meaningless. I grasped the situation more acutely than anyone else. It was during this realization that I sensed something awry with my health. While I had always been prone to illness, this time felt distinctly different. I promptly reached out to my father, who escorted me to the hospital where I received the diagnosis of cancer. Fortunately, it was detected early, and the doctor assured me that I could commence treatment immediately. Eager to begin the healing process, I implored my father to bring only the essentials from home. Hastily, I navigated through the hospital admission procedures, unable to meet Ben that day due to his work commitments. I conveyed the disquieting news to him through a brief message, informing him, "Cancer has been found, and I'm being hospitalized for treatment immediately." In these moments of anxiety about the uncertain future, Ben's image crept into my thoughts. Despite my belief that my love for him had waned, a latent desire to face him properly and continue our life together as a couple lingered deep within my heart. Even though Ben had consistently been aloof and indifferent, I envisioned a scenario where, now that I was weakened, he might express concern and ask, "Are you okay?" I yearned for some warm words and would have been content with just one visit. I wondered if he struggled with meals and household chores in my absence. I felt remorse for not being able to fulfill the household duties I had always taken for granted. However, as days passed in the hospital, Ben never visited. He had read my message, and yet there was no expression of concern, not even a simple reply acknowledging the situation. His apparent indifference, despite my serious illness, shook me to the core, causing profound pain. Realizing the futility of my expectations, I decided to stop anticipating anything from Ben. With this newfound mindset, I faced the grueling battle against the illness. The treatment was as demanding as expected, marked by enduring pain and suffering. The medication's side effects took a toll on my body, leading to many sleepless nights filled with discomfort. There were moments when I contemplated giving up on treatment, allowing my deteriorating body to take its course and end my life. However, each time I felt this way, the encouraging words from my parents, reassuring me that I was doing great and that things would surely get better, compelled me to summon strength and endure until today. Then on a day when I was particularly unwell, lying in bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, The door to my room unexpectedly swung open. It wasn't the day for my parents to visit, and I couldn't help but wonder who had entered. The identity of the visitor became clear as I shifted my gaze and saw Ben standing there. Had he finally come to visit me, genuinely concerned about my condition? As he looked at my emaciated face with hollow cheeks, a whirlwind of emotions left me speechless. Would he come to dislike me even more? Without displaying any concern for my state, Ben sat on a chair next to the bed, stared at me, and laughed. "So this is how bad one can look with cancer, huh? You don't even look like a woman anymore." His words made me feel as if the blood had drained from my face. These were words that should never be said to someone fighting cancer. I didn't want him to say anything more, but unaware of my feelings, Ben continued with even more hurtful words. "Ever since you've been hospitalized and not at home, every day has been like heaven. The house is a mess, but I don't even have to go back there. Life is so comfortable without you." His heartless words reopened my wounds. Why must I be subjected to such cruel words? Why is there not a single word of concern from him? Although I wanted to vehemently criticize Ben, my weakened body couldn't move as I wished, and all I could do was silently accept his brutal words. I looked at Ben with a vacant gaze, and noticing my stare, he laughed condescendingly. Then suddenly, saying, "Oh yeah, by the way," he uttered unbelievable words. "I've already filed the divorce papers. I'll be taking the house. As for the property division, you hardly have any right to refuse." The moment I heard those words, my vision blurred and twisted. Did he file the divorce papers without even consulting me? Why? As I was at a loss for words, Ben continued to speak. "I've really fallen for someone. She's 20 years younger, but I'm serious about her. I plan to be with her, so you're in the way." The realization that he was having an affair raced through my mind. However, Ben, having said what he wanted, began preparing to leave. "Wait a minute," I said, but Ben paid no attention. There was clearly no love left for me in his heart. The realization was so painful that it didn't matter anymore. "I see, I understand," I said, and Ben left the hospital room with a pleased laugh. After that, I endured my treatment with even more determination than before. Despite the hardships, I focused my will, resolved to completely cure my cancer and regain my health. 2 days passed like this. It might sound short, but for me, unable to sleep properly at night, those 2 days felt very long. I wondered if the divorce Ben mentioned really happened, or if he had said it just to unnerve me. The uncertainty was unbearable, but somehow I managed to continue my treatment. In fact, I had a trump card to completely bring down Ben. Even Ben, who seemed almost inhuman, would be thrown into chaos once he realized it. If I panicked, he would surely try to contact me in some way. While waiting with this thought, Ben's call came in. Thinking it improper to answer in the hospital room, I pretended not to notice, but Ben persistently kept calling. Even on silent mode, the continuous calls were too annoying. I'm in the hospital room, and it's inconvenient to have my phone ringing, so please don't call. I sent this message. The calls finally stopped, but then came texts like, "Please let me talk to you just once." "Please, I was wrong about everything." "I'll apologize properly." Apparently, he had resorted to messaging since I wasn't answering his calls. All his words seemed like self-defense. Probably, Ben realized why I accepted the divorce so easily. "Can I come over there now?" Faced with my silence, Ben seemed to have reached his limit and sent that message. Honestly, facing Ben now amidst my grueling battle with illness felt like nothing but pain. But if I refused, he would probably keep calling, so I replied, "Do as you like." My revenge was about to begin. Ben, who had unjustly treated me for so long and divorced without consent, deserved severe punishment that would make him despite his life. I had been eagerly anticipating the moment when I could bring him down to the depths of despair. "Hey, what the hell is this all about?" Ben entered the room with a shout, his tone suggesting a palpable sense of panic. To an outsider, it might seem like he was overreacting, but given the circumstances, it was natural for Ben to be agitated. After all, I had been concealing an incredibly important secret, and the critical moment had arrived. "I had no idea that you had assets worth $10 million. Why didn't you tell me?" He spoke, placing my passbook on the desk, clearly displaying a deposit of over $10 million. "I never mentioned it because you never asked," I said. "How could I imagine a housewife like you having so much money? If I knew you had this much, I wouldn't have divorced you." "That's not my problem. It's Ben's fault for divorcing me without proper confirmation. Stop with the pointless excuses." Despite his domineering behavior and divorcing me without my consent, Ben couldn't stop his selfish remarks upon discovering my assets. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have divorced you if I knew." I decided to reveal the truth to the selfish man. The truth is, I accumulated this fortune of over $10 million through investments. I started to fill my spare time, and it was my parents who suggested, "Why don't you try investing?" Our family life was comfortable, even on Ben's salary alone, but I wanted to contribute to our finances in some way. My father, knowledgeable about investments, immediately taught me diligently when I expressed interest. Thanks to his guidance, I started with the hope of making even a small profit and continued investing steadily. I made my first investment 5 years ago, and since then I rapidly improved, becoming capable of earning significant amounts of money through investments. Even my father was astonished, saying, "I never expected you to grow this much." The profits I generated over these 5 years are the $10 million recorded in the passbook. Ben actually brought it. I was planning to tell you when the timing was right, but then I got cancer. You divorced me without listening to anything I had to say. I never intended to keep this wealth a secret forever. Once I overcame my battle with cancer and could return to my normal life, I planned to tell Ben about this $10 million. I had originally intended to share it with him, envisioning that we could continue our life as a couple and use it when necessary. However, Ben selfishly chose to divorce before I could reveal this financial secret. Now that we're strangers, it feels odd to disclose it to him. Given this outcome, the entire $10 million probably belongs to me. As I recounted my story, Ben's face flushed, and he began shouting, "If I knew you had this much money, I wouldn't have divorced you. It's your fault for keeping it a secret. So pay me $10 million in the property division. You need to atone for the sin of keeping secrets from your husband." Whether he was panicking over the reality of such a vast fortune or frustrated that he couldn't get his hands on it, Ben started making unrealistic demands. In response, I unintentionally laughed. Then yelled at me, "What are you laughing at? Stop belittling me. I've always been annoyed by your attitude. I never thought you'd be so cunning to have such a fortune as a wife. A wife's assets belong to her husband. You have to give me this $10 million. I never intended to keep this secret forever. I was planning to tell you, but you divorced me first. Stop making excuses. It's all your fault for keeping secrets." Without any recollection of making excuses, Ben became more enraged with each word I spoke, blaming and berating me. His shouting was too much for my head, still recovering from illness, and I couldn't bear it. Realizing it was futile to continue talking with Ben, who wouldn't accept my words and would surely try to make me the villain, I quickly ended it. "Enough is enough. You divorced me of your own accord, right? Who filed the divorce papers without my consent? I always thought your behavior was terrible, but I never imagined you could be so cruel. To think a person could feel this much frustration. Now my heart was filled, not with the pain of battling cancer, but with resentment towards Ben. He should have realized that shouting this loudly would affect my weakened body. More than that, I couldn't suppress my anger towards this selfish person who sat arrogantly beside my bed, accusing me with words worn from his self-centered thoughts. Do you know what I thought when I found out I had cancer? I thought that answering him might make Ben worry about me a little, be kinder to me, and reconsider his feelings. Instead, he didn't even come to visit me in the hospital. When he finally showed up, he told me he had filed for divorce without my consent and that he would take the house. How could he be so selfish and then come here criticizing me for having substantial assets? I said it many times. I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I was planning to find the right time to tell you. You destroyed that chance with your own hands. I had never blamed Ben this much before. I had always forgiven his selfish behavior, thinking we were a couple who should support each other. I never scolded or reprimanded him, always enduring for his sake. But the reason I could endure and keep going was that I had love for Ben. I truly loved him. Now I don't have any love left for him. All I feel is uncontrollable anger and disbelief towards Ben, who only speaks selfishly. How can someone be so self-centered? What kind of upbringing leads to such a lack of empathy? After all, a person who indulges in an affair and divorces without consent can't possibly have serious thoughts. I was too stunned to speak, realizing it was futile to harbor any doubts. Please, my girlfriend found out you have $10 million and says she'll divorce me if I don't get it from you. If I don't get this money, I'll be all alone. You still love me, right? Don't you want to help the person you love? So Ben's mistress also knows about my $10 million fortune. He must have carelessly told her. From Ben's story, it seems his mistress is also quite obsessed with money. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess. As much as Ben and his mistress seem to be a match, I couldn't care less about him. No matter how much suffering comes his way, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the $10 million. Otherwise, I'll suffer. Please help me. I had never seen Ben so desperate. Ben's expression seemed so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, I felt disappointed and miserable, realizing he had never been this desperate about anything related to me. The more we talked, the colder my feelings for Ben became. I realized that talking to him anymore was pointless. No more dealing with this rotten man could possibly lead to my happiness. I felt foolish for suffering and hoping during my illness that he might come and speak kindly to me one day, oblivious to my feelings. Then continued to plead, "Please, I'm begging you. Help me." But I couldn't bear to hear his words any longer. "Please leave now," I said. Ben started to plead with a look of desperation. Even that was noisy and unpleasant to me. I pressed the nurse call button, explained the situation, and asked the nurse to get rid of Ben. A security guard came and forcibly removed him from the room. "Please listen to me. I need you," he shouted until the moment he was thrown out. But I no longer accepted any of his words. Afterwards, he visited the hospital many times, but the nurses, knowing the situation, never let him near my room again. According to a friend, Ben, unable to get the $10 million, disappointed his mistress and was promptly divorced. Now left alone, as for me, I continued to confront my cancer with determination and finally recovered and was discharged. The relief of overcoming my difficult battle with cancer and the newfound energy I felt were more precious than anything. Now I'm living a peaceful and relaxed life, gradually using the assets I grew through investments.